And I will. All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the second Stakeholder Steering Committee meeting for the Priority Climate Action Plan. My name is Simran Judy. I'm a Senior Regional Planner at Fresno Council of Governments, and I'm serving as a project manager for the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Planning Grant Program. And I want to allow the project team to introduce themselves. So I'll start with Brenda, and we'll go from FCOG to LSA to SSG.
I'm Brenda Thomas from Fresno Council of Governments. I'm the Administrative Services Manager and Public Information Officer.
Christine, you want to start for LSA?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Kai. I am the Director of Mobility for Central and Northern California for LSA. I serve as the Project Manager for Fresno COG's PCAP.
That's great. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jessica Correa. I'm the Director of Air Quality and Climate Change Services here at LSA, and my team's providing technical support for the preparation of the PCAP. And I'll pass it over to Carol at SSG.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Fraser. I work at Sustainability Solutions Group, SSG, and we are working with LSA on this project. And I'm joined today by my colleagues Esteban and Sophie.
Hi everyone, I'm Esteban Soto. I'm consultant at SSG, so we are providing support to LSA to this project. I'm gonna pass to Sophie if she's here.
Hi, it says I'm Christine. Sorry, I don't know why. Wrong link. My name is Sophie Levesque. I work with SSG as an analyst on Fresno project.
Thank you. So I take it everyone can, oh, I have not shared my screen yet. I'm gonna share my screen. So we have quite a bit of information to go over today. So I'd like to hold all questions till the end of the presentation. Questions can be placed in the chat or the Q&A function, and then you could also use the raise hand function if you would like to be unmuted. Additionally, the slide deck and the recording of today's meeting will be made available to the public. You can all see my screen, so I'm going to go to the next slide. So I'll get started on reviewing the project progress report to date. So the project team has completed quite a few milestones thus far. They've identified the highest emitting or priority greenhouse gas emission sectors, held both virtual and in-person outreach, time permitting. And by the end of today's meeting, at the discretion of the Stakeholder Steering Committee, the priority measures will be selected and then quantified as the plan commences at the end of this month. And so I think we've stressed this enough, but the timeline has been accelerated. However, the project team has been able to complete all the tasks as planned for the last 3 months, and we hope to stay consistent with that. So as you can see, it's January, and we're having our second Stakeholder Steering Committee meeting. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Jessica at LSA to go over the GHG emissions inventory.
That's great. Thanks, Simran. So as you mentioned, I'm Jessica Correa. I'm the Director of Air Quality and Climate Change Services here at LSA, and my team, along with key staff at SSG, led the preparation of the emissions inventory for the PCAP. So today I'll be providing a brief overview of the sectors included in the inventory, the methodology utilized for the inventory preparation, and the results of the analysis. Next slide. To start out with, a greenhouse gas emissions inventory is an accounting of the amount of greenhouse gases emitted to the atmosphere over a specific period of time. GHGs are emitted and sequestered from a variety of categories. Next slide. So for the PCAP, we focused on GHG emissions from the following sectors, looking at transportation, which included on-road sources like passenger cars and heavy-duty trucks, as well as aviation. We looked at energy use from residential and commercial buildings, as well as emissions from the agricultural sector, both from ag itself, like the working lands or animals involved with agricultural, as well as agricultural equipment. We looked at waste management emissions, looking at both solid waste and emissions that came from wastewater treatment. Industrial emissions, so manufacturing facilities that are in the valley. And then we have a grouping of other emissions, which might include consumer products or other off-road equipment like construction equipment. It's worth noting that there are other sectors that we could consider and that are contributing to GHGs in the area. So we've got a GHG emissions inventory that we'll be presenting today, but emissions like from forestry or natural lands and urban forestry have not been included in the emissions inventory that we're looking at today. So it's not representative of all emissions in the valley. So that's something we'd want to continue refining in the next stage of the climate plan development. So in the CCAP phase, as we have more time to look into those sources. So next slide. And so guidance from the EPA for this PCAP preparation is to focus on customizing your emissions inventory for the region based on readily available data. So that really drove the sectors that we were analyzing, as well as the sources that we utilized for the emissions inventory preparation. So we used 3 major resources for the preparation of the PCAP emissions inventory. We looked at the state GHG emissions inventory program, which is data and associated modeling tools developed and maintained by the California Air Resources Board. That formed the bulk of our available information, as well as a really great and useful tool that US EPA has developed. It's the Community GHG Emissions Inventory Quantification Tool. And that tool specifically has associated data sources and refined modeling available. So we looked at the state and local planning for energy or SLOPE tool and the facility level information on greenhouse gases tool or the FLIGHT tool. And then finally, there was a recent GHG reduction plan prepared by the City of Fresno, which is the City of Fresno GHG reduction plan update. There was a specific emissions inventory prepared for that plan in 2001, so very recent data. So we did utilize that for some of the emissions information that's based on population or that's a per capita emissions information. We were able to scale that to the county. So that was also utilized. We concentrated on the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Those were converted to carbon dioxide equivalents, or CO2e. So you'll see that referred to in the coming slides with the overview slides. And then we selected 2019 as the GHG emissions inventory base year. And that was based on really looking at the most recent complete set of data that was available, which wasn't impacted by the results of the COVID-19 pandemic. So 2019 was a year that had modeling readily available for the transportation sector. And looking at the sectors that we were looking at, we did have later data available, maybe from 2021, 2022, but we didn't want the results of the inventory to be skewed by usage patterns that might be different because of the pandemic. So next slide. Now, I also, just before we go to the overview of the emissions inventory, want to take a minute and just give some appreciation to Fresno County for what makes this area unique, and which is really driving the results of the emissions inventory that we see on the next slide. So we do have some main transportation corridors that go up and down the valley and that dissect Fresno County, including the 99 and the I-5. And that, along with the regional nature of the county and the transportation related to that, is evident in the emissions inventory. Now on this map, the red areas, those are developed areas, and you can see a concentration in the Fresno and Clovis area, as well as in the municipalities throughout the region. The tans and greens, those are going to be more of your natural lands and forestry, but all of this yellow is cultivated crops. And so we'll see that come out in the results in the emission inventory as well. Next slide. And so this is the summary of what we found from the emissions inventory so far. So looking at those sectors I discussed, the graph on the right is a breakdown of with the different sectors that we analyzed, what percentage each sector represented of that emissions inventory. So you can see transportation, those on-road sources like emissions from heavy-duty trucks. So passenger cars and aviation representing approximately 44% of the inventory. Agriculture being a major contributor at 19% of the emissions inventory that we analyzed. Looking at ag a little bit further, we saw the bulk of the emissions coming from cattle operations, both enteric emissions from cattle as well as from manure management. We saw the next biggest contributor to the emissions being residential and commercial buildings, so energy use related to those buildings. Industrial emissions was the next biggest contributor to emissions in the Fresno County area, followed by waste management, and then a smaller contribution from those consumer products or other off-road sources. So that's what we found to date. Again, in the next stage of the emissions inventory development through the CCAP, this will continue to be refined. But I'm happy to answer any questions or get into the weeds a little bit on the methodology when we have time for questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Jessica. And so Brenda will take it from here and go over the outreach report.
You can move up 2 slides. Okay. As you are aware, Fresno Cog staff developed a community engagement hub, and this is a screenshot of what it looks like here to house all things related to the CPRG and the Priority Climate Action Plan work to create one central location. Next slide. The website or hub contained the elements that are listed here, starting with the PCAP timeline, showing what phase we were in, what's been completed, what's coming up, background information on CPRG and the 2 climate action plans that we'll be working on, engagement information, how to get involved, meeting information, etc. Everything down to who to contact at Fresno Cog. Next slide. As we moved into conducting community outreach on the PCAP priority measures, we drafted a survey in the hub available online and through hard copy in English and Spanish. This is what it looked like. Hopefully you've all had a chance to answer the survey and forward it to your contacts. And the online survey launched and ran for, with this condensed timeline, roughly 2 weeks online. Next slide. I did want to reiterate what Jessica said earlier. If anyone's not familiar with the survey asked respondents to rank 4 sectors of high priority greenhouse gas reduction measures. Again, that was transportation, waste, water, and sustainable materials, agriculture, and energy and building materials. So we broke them down into those categories and asked them to rank them. Then we publicized the survey through our community partners and stakeholders such as yourself, sharing the survey links and invitations with their contacts. We created social media posts on all of our COG sites, and we are on several. And we held 2 virtual meetings, December 7th at 5:30 and the 11th at noon during the lunch hour, and then in-person meetings with stakeholders, and that was really Christine and Simran, and then community members within the rural unincorporated disadvantaged communities of Lanier, Sanger or Tombstone, and Cantua Creek. Next slide. We also sent out emails to and newsletters to Fresno Cog's contact database of just over 5,200 people within Fresno County. And that included representatives from all of our member agencies, school districts, community organizations, tribal governments, seniors, and many, many other contacts, but just want to call those out specifically. And as a side note, our open rate on those is anywhere from 32% to 44%, which is pretty high. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back one, Simran?
Yes.
Thank you. In addition, comments were pulled, transcribed, and incorporated into the online survey results. When they were received from these other sources, we had a dedicated project email address. And so somebody could send us an email and it would be automatically pulled into the comments. Same with voicemail. They could leave an English or Spanish voicemail and it would be transcribed. Any social media content hooked up to our survey would also be pulled in. Okay, now next slide. Thank you. We also received comments from staff email accounts and phone calls that we took. And so we forwarded all of those contacts or comments to our consultant for consideration as well. I'm going to go over roughly and quickly what we received and the results of the survey. The public input we received came from the locations you see here on the map. And I know it's hard to see, but if I zoom in, then you leave out the outsides of the county. But this kind of gives you an idea of the locations people were at. The numbers aren't always accurate until you really zoom in because they're not necessarily giving you an exact address. But this is pretty close. For the survey itself over those 2 weeks, we had 554 views. And of that, 117 respondents, 1,261 responses were input, 22 additional comments above what we asked for, and then 24 subscribers who just wanted to stay in touch with the whole process and be added to our database. Next slide. So here's the ranking of by sector according to what we received. And again, transportation was the first category. And you can see the lower the score, correct me, Christine, if I'm wrong, the lower the score, the higher it scored, right? It's not intuitive, but the lower the score that it received, the better it actually did, the more support it received. So we collected all of this information, which will be available on the hub. I'm working on a report and we're working on a chapter that will go forward for review. But you can kind of read through the rankings here. It starts with building a well-connected bike and pedestrian system that provides more options for walking and biking. And we gave examples of what each one consisted of so that people had an idea of what they were looking at as much as possible. Then maintain and expanding the transit system and offering other types of transit strategies, developing a public electric vehicle charging network, continuing to convert government vehicle fleets to zero emission, and providing incentives for carpool and vanpool. So their favorites in those were those that scored lower. And then wastewater and sustainable materials, programs and incentives to reduce or divert waste was scored the highest, followed by reducing methane emissions from landfills and wastewater treatment facilities. And then it went into policies and programs and installation of renewable energy measures at wastewater treatment facilities. Next slide. Agriculture was the next sector that we asked people to rank, and the highest score on that was programs and incentives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with manure management from livestock and poultry operations. This one came out in a number of different ways. I did have a meeting with some citizen groups that had a dairy close by, and they were very concerned about this. So I did speak about that with our consultants as we were going over the results, but it did score very, very high. Programs and incentives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with agricultural equipment, tractors, harvesting, and pumps. Then programs and incentives to reduce greenhouse gas associated with agricultural burning, cropland management, and all of that. And then fertilizer application on managed soil came in last place, but there wasn't a huge spread on this particular group. Next slide. The last sector was energy and building materials. This one was big. It was bigger than all the other ones. So we're just grateful for everybody who took time to finish this survey. But the highest scoring was incentive programs for the purchase of certified energy efficient appliances, heating and cooling equipment, lighting, building products to replace inefficient products. And these had, as you can see, a much bigger range as far as scoring. That one scored pretty high compared to the lowest ranking of new benchmark in building performance standards and exceeding the California Energy Commission's current building envelope energy efficient standards. And we had to look up all these terms. Sometimes we got questions about them. We tried to explain what those meant to people so they knew how they were voting. But coming in second was incorporating water efficiency measures that reduce water heating energy consumption, incorporating measures into green building policies, and that came up in some stakeholder meetings, and on down the list. So you'll be able to see these in more detail as we move forward as well. So those were the rankings that were sent forward to our consultants, as well as all other types of comments that were very wide ranging with completely different ideas or people who just didn't like this at all. And we forwarded all of that. That will also be posted to the website and made available to our policy advisory committee and board as we move forward. Next slide. I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you, Brenda. And so this leads into Christine's piece on measure selection. So Christine.
Thank you, Simran. Next slide, please. So we use a multi-pronged approach to select the priority measures. EPA requires that the priority measures must be near-term implementation ready with considerable GHG reductions. And our team also look at the cost associated with the measures. So the consultant team and the Fresno Coq team, we first look at the GHG inventory, which was presented to you by Jessica, and we look at the top sectors with the highest GHG emission. And so the first three sectors are transportation, agricultural, and the building energy sectors. These are the top three sectors. We also look at the, as Brenda presented, we then develop draft measures and send out to the stakeholders and also the public for the input and ranking. And we also heard from sector representatives and also received some potential interest from organizations for potential EPA implementation grants. So next slide. As I mentioned, the top three sectors with the highest GHG inventory in our region are transportation, agricultural, and building energies. But we also heard from a couple of organizations who expressed interest in submitting potential grants for EPA's implementation grant, which really is what this PCAP is going to be developed for. So we thought, yeah, we are going to accommodate that and edit the waste sector into the sectors that we ask the stakeholders and the communities for input. Next slide. So as Brenda mentioned, we sent out a survey to the stakeholders, which is this committee, and ask the stakeholders to rank all the draft or recommended measures across all 4 sectors. And we also send out a survey to the public, ask the public to rank the measures within each sectors, because so it's a little different methodology, but we thought that people sitting on the stakeholders have a little more exposure to different measures across the sectors. So we asked them to rank the measures across all 4 sectors. But with the public, because there are altogether 24, 25 sectors of measures, and just to help people understand or be focused on the measures within the sectors, not to confuse them with total 24, 25 measures, we ask the public to rank the measures within each sector. So this is the result that's shown. Obviously, transportation comes out ranked really high based on the stakeholder ranking. And then we use both rankings to really decide which measures to recommend to be included in the PCAP as the priority measures. Next. So eventually we, given the time we have and the resources we have for the PCAP, we decided that we are going to recommend 5 measures for the transportation. Eventually, it's all the 5 transportation measures and 3 ag measures out of the 4, and then 3 building energy measures and 2 waste measures based on the project interest from communities to move forward and to do the quantification and eventually to be included in the PCAP. Next. So I'm not going to go into the details. As Brenda already explained to you, the 5 measures, priority measures in the transportation sector includes the EV charging network, the public charging network, convert the municipal fleets into zero emission vehicles, bike impact system, and then enhance the public transportation and also carpool, vanpool, and other shared mobility options. So you probably have seen all these measures in the survey. Next. The ag sectors, we, as Jessica presented and also Brenda also pointed out the ranking, we eventually selected the top 3 measures with the highest ranking. The only one for the ag sector that's not selected is the fertilizer measure that got ranked lowest. Next. And building energy sector, we picked 3 measures. The first one is for energy efficient appliances and equipment. The second one is to reduce water heating energy consumption. And the third one is to bundle on-site renewable energy generation with energy efficient improvements. Next. And then based on the project interest from organizations that have reached out to Fresno COG, we picked 2 measures to be included in the PCAP. The first one is to reduce, or to basically is household waste management. And the second one is for the wastewater treatment facility. Next.
So at this time, we request the committee to make a motion to approve the priority measures as recommended by the project team. So I think all of the stakeholder steering committee members are panelists. So if anyone would like to unmute to make a motion to approve, or if you guys have any specific questions.
So move.
Second, Moses, FCRTA.
Motion by Rodney Horton of Reedley and a second from Moses, FCRTA.
I think you've got a hand up too.
And Mike has a hand up. So Mike, you can unmute if you'd like to say anything.
Just a question on those action plans, those measures.
have you or are you going to submit those action plans for analysis of the stakeholders who are going to be affected by those to tell you how much it's going to cost to implement that stuff? Or are you just going ahead with these measures and hope it all comes out right?
So the measures that are selected are implementation ready, that there's existing programs that they can help support. We couldn't really go for moonshot ideas since the implementation grant NOFO is already out. So all of the priority measures that have been selected are attainable and tangible in the next few years. Was there a specific strategy that you saw that maybe you need more clarification on, or you don't think it's actually tangible?
Simran, can I
Yeah.
chime in? So Mike, so the measures are kind of higher level, and the consulting team is working on quantifying the GHG reduction for each of the priority measures for the year of 2030. But if anybody, any organization decides to apply for the implementation grant for the next phase under any of the measures, then that project application needs to really provide estimated cost for implementation, so that analysis will be done in the next phase in the grant application.
So all this is for applying for these grants under these measures.
Yes.
To
There's a total
further study them or to implement them?
To implement.
Implementation, yes. $4.3 billion available nationwide.
Okay, so for instance, if the BIA wanted to get a grant for finding certifiable equipment to reduce GHG in their building products to get certified, those products are very expensive, by the way. And so it will increase the cost of housing across the board, multifamily, single family. It will increase it because those certification processes are very extensive and expensive to get somebody who is actually certified for providing that type of equipment. In addition, right now, the builders build to the state building codes, which require certain efficiency standards anyway. But if you then put on top of that a requirement for having certified reduction equipment, like new ranges and stoves and refrigerators and AC systems, that is obviously a problem for anybody who wants to acquire that stuff. So I'm just saying that you may think this is implementable, but it's implementable at a cost. And I just want everybody to understand that, because none of this stuff is cheap. I saw one piece of information there that seems counterintuitive, putting charging stations in affected communities, that those disadvantaged communities don't have the resources to buy electric vehicles because electric vehicles are too expensive. So how does that further the activities that you're trying to promote, unless you're going to buy a lot of EV vehicles for distribution to the disadvantaged communities at a subsidized rate? I can't even afford an EV because they're too damn expensive. So, I don't know how a person in a disadvantaged community is going to be able to afford one. So it's counterintuitive. So there's a lot of other stuff in those actions, and I know I'm in the minority on this committee. And based on the results you received from your survey, I get the feeling that this survey was targeted to activist groups. And it wasn't truly a widespread, how do I phrase it, a random survey. This was targeted. And it was not a random survey to the public in general. Now, if it was, the people who obviously responded were obviously a lot more interested than the normal run-of-the-mill person who drives to and from work on the city streets and freeways. So I'm just saying that based on the priorities set by that survey, I think it went to a very select group. That's my impression. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it sure doesn't seem like it. Based on when I went through there, I had a whole different idea of what the priorities should be. Thanks for listening to my rant.
Thank you, Mike. Sophia, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify the rankings that we're weighing in on, those are just grant categories for funding, right? We're not voting on like new policies or rules, because that's all happening at the state. Am I right or am I not right?
That's correct.
Right. So these are not rules we're voting on. It's funding categories.
Yeah, it's opportunities to apply for funding for, programs that we could supplement existing programs.
Got it. Thank you.
Moses?
Yeah, if I could chime in, Mike, your rant and raving wasn't all that off. If I could explain a little bit about putting in public chargers in some of the disadvantaged communities, and I'm speaking as a rural public operator. I haven't shared much of this with a lot of agencies or individuals, but FCRTA has done quite a few studies in the rural areas with regard to the grid system, offsite, onsite, as to what the capabilities are, especially with the mandate to go zero emission vehicles by 2040 for public agencies. And I'm sure school districts will follow, but we've done quite a few studies. We're also doing a microgrid resiliency hub study right now, Mike. And what that's going to consist of is looking at potential sites in both incorporated cities in the rural areas and unincorporated communities such as Biola, Lanier, Cantua, so that at some point in time we could do a resiliency hub there with solar, level 2 chargers, and so forth. So there's really a lot more to those basic paragraphs that you looked at. And I'm just kind of shedding some light and some background because there's a lot more to it. And as these considerations go forward for future grant proposals, there's been some preliminary groundwork done to this date, but there's a lot more to the story with regard to what the direction and the potential is in some of these areas. And again, I'm speaking just as a rural public operator, and as vehicles decrease in size, Mike, you're going to see a lot more smaller to mid-sized vehicles. And also, these vehicles will originate in some of these locations to minimize and avoid the VMT, vehicle miles traveled. So it's really a lot more information than what's in these paragraphs. And I just kind of wanted to share that with you because some of this information, it hasn't really gotten out, but hopefully that's helpful to understand some of this direction. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Moses. And I see one more hand in the attendees list, so that'll be our last question until the end of the presentation, which just have a few more slides to go through. So Sophia, you can.
I guess just to kind of not clarify, but ask like a clarifying question. So what like Moses was talking about is those like charging stations and stuff like that that would be put in aren't necessarily for like the general public, like personal cars, but more so like for like public transportation is what it sounds like.
For municipal fleets and vehicles and, well, Moses, do you want to, field that? So would it be
Sure. Yeah,
open to public as well?
The idea is really to afford disadvantaged communities with what we consider resiliency hubs, and they could be microgrid with solar charging, also level 2 charging, and then it would be up to the policymakers, the communities, to determine how many of those would be for public use. Would there be a charge or a fee, depending if it's solar driven energy, or would it be obviously public use would be one of the factors, because as the rural systems morph into micro transit and rideshare programs, and you get into smaller vehicles, we're going to need locations to charge these vehicles. The idea too is to promote and minimize greenhouse gas efforts. And the Air District has availability of funding for vouchers to purchase second used electric vehicles in certain communities, depending on certain criteria. And so it's going to involve both public and private, and that's what it's going to be open to. It's not going to be limited to it, to just public. What you want to do is create an opportunity to avail this energy source to both the public and private, along with battery energy management systems, and also backup batteries for emergency power to a nearby community center, or a senior center, or a library, such as a cooling or a warming center as well.
Cool.
Thank you, Moses, for elaborating on that. We're going to go ahead and move forward in the presentation, and then we'll do questions at the end.
Simon, did the committee vote?
Yes, it was Rodney Horton from Reedley and Moses.
I think we just made a motion in a second, but I don't
yeah.
think vote help.
So I don't know if everyone else needs to necessarily say aye. Which I guess.
Is there any opposition?
Yes.
They just made a motion. Now they need to vote.
Yes.
So how would you like people to vote? Do you want them to raise their hand? Or
I guess they could just unmute and say aye. And if there's any opposition, I mean.
If I may recommend me just going down the list just to make sure for the clear record.
Okay. There's some subs and there's some folks that are on the stakeholder steering committee who didn't join as panelists. So I'll start. So we have Rodney and Moses. So I'll just, City of Fresno.
Aye. This is Sophia.
Thank you. City of Clovis. City of Coalinga.
Simran, I think I saw Ryan on the public attendee list.
We'll come back to him. And City of Coalinga. City of Huron. City of Mendota. Oh, Ryan, City of Clovis.
Yeah. Aye.
Thank you. Mendota and City of Orange Cove. City of Parlier.
Aye.
Thank you. City of Reedley, we had Rodney.
Aye.
Thank you. City of San Joaquin. City of Selma.
Aye.
Thank you. And I don't know if I missed it. I think I missed quite a few. We have FCRTA,
Yes.
the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District,
Aye.
and did I say City of Sanger?
No, this is Derek Sylvester with the City of Sanger. Aye.
City of Fowler, thank you.
Aye.
City of Fireball. Central Valley Community Foundation.
Aye.
And I think that's everyone that I have from the panelists.
City of Kerman, yes.
City of Kerman, sorry, Jesus. Okay, I think we can move forward. And we'll do questions at the end. I see some hands raised. We'll just go through the next few slides and then we'll have discussion. So again, as Christine mentioned, the reason why we are involved in this plan and executing this plan is that the EPA has made available $4.3 billion nationwide under the Inflation Reduction Act for the climate pollution reduction program. And since Fresno is one of 67 MSAs with funds for planning, the Fresno region will have favorable consideration with the PCAP in place. So as of right now, a notice of intent to apply for implementation grants is due February 1st, and the actual application will be due April 1st. And the deadline to submit questions will be about mid-March. And we went over this at the last stakeholder meeting, but we're just going to do a bit of a review, and there's some new information. So the eligible applicants are state agencies, municipalities, the air district, COGS, MPOs, and a coalition of the eligible entities. So this is just very important to note that to avoid duplicative efforts, and since EPA will only award one sector per region, it's highly encouraged to apply in coalitions, and applicants can submit only 2 applications. One is the lead and another as a lead for a coalition. So this is some information I wanted to highlight. And then the application itself, another reason to collaborate is there are a lot of requirements such as the assumptions and methodology for GHG reduction and the LIDAC benefit analysis are very resource demanding requirements to have complete by, spring of this year. So it would be helpful to, work in a coalition to pool resources. And another just important fact for the NOFO is that there are award size and tiers. So there will be separate tiers depending on the request or ask for award. So 10 to 50 grants will be, if there will be 10 to 50 grants awarded if the ask is ranging from 2 million to 9.9 million for tier 3, while only 4 to 10 applications will be awarded for grants totaling 200 to 500 million each. And here's some questions you may want to ask if you're preparing to apply. And also, again, note the deadline to ask questions to EPA is March 15th. And therefore, the recommended approach is, coordinated effort, determining, what the needs are early on, thinking of projects that would fall under the priority measures we went over today, and pooling resources and doing that as soon as possible. And just to mention, this is unofficial discussion, but we're trying to coordinate with the state agencies to ensure that there will be oversight of awarded funds, since applications are very technically intensive. So we want to make sure that we can put together coalitions in the Fresno region so our jurisdictions aren't competing against one another. So Fresno COG's exploring the idea of going after funds for transportation. We're coordinating with Caltrans and EPA on how to make that, possible. And furthermore, here is the EPA implementation grant link, so you guys could look at the NOFO, which is available. And that concludes the presentation for today. You can contact myself or Christine, or Brenda, if you guys have any questions about the PCAP thus far, but also we're here right now. So you can drop any questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can raise your hand and I can promote you to panelists so you could ask any questions live. And thank you all for taking your time to be here today. We really appreciate it. Okay, Sophia.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Is COG going to do any, are we sort of on our own to just decide how and when we're going to apply and we apply directly to the EPA, or is COG going to do some kind of matchmaking with us, or what would you recommend going forward?
I think this space and this group right here is really key in figuring out who would be willing to apply under each sector. So we've identified 4 sectors. Transportation, it would be fairly obvious for the Transportation Regional Planning Agency to go after those funds. Other sectors like agriculture, energy and building, and waste and wastewater, sustainable materials management, those are the other 3 that COG doesn't have the expertise. So we would, want any takers, anyone who'd want to take the lead for the region. And it could be a jurisdiction, other government agency. So I think this space right now is where we want to discuss those things. And if the city of Fresno, being, one of the larger urban areas of the region, would want to take the lead on one, I think that would be pretty logical and helpful.
Yeah, well, I could certainly take that back to our team. And are you so you kind of want to determine who might be the lead applicants, and then you would encourage the jurisdictions that are interested in those areas to contact those lead applicants and work with them? Is that the idea?
Exactly. So basically, the lead applicants should maybe formalize some sort of solicitation for projects under their sector umbrella, whatever. So if it's transportation, we want to funnel all of the transportation implementation projects that, the 16 member agencies of FCOG has, and then we could go from there and other agencies as well. But, that way we're not competing against each other, and, it also would make for a stronger application to EPA.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any particular sectors that's jumping out at you, we could discuss that as well.
Well, I know that all our priorities were transportation, so we'd be signing up with COG. Yeah, but I can also look at, what was the category where you wanted maybe a city to head it up? What category was that?
Energy and building.
Any other takers on the call that would like to head that up? If not, I can check, but.
I don't know if we have County of Fresno on the call today.
Mohammed is on the attendee list.
Unfortunately, I didn't even call Mohammed's name earlier, but I do see that. So if Mohammed has anything to share. But are there any questions about the priority measures? I know there were some hands up earlier. And I could go back to any slides if you guys would like as well. Yes, Jalacia?
Yes, it's Horacio with the city of Parlier. So just to make sure I understood correctly, once the PCAP is finalized, then we will be applying for the implementation funding that's due in April. And so if there's no jurisdiction that's interested in taking the lead in any of the categories, then we just wouldn't be applying for that category in this round.
Well, this is a one-time funding opportunity as well. So we would hope that you know, our region jumps at the opportunity, especially since we're one of the 67 MSAs, will bode well in competition. But also the idea is not waiting until the end of the PCAP. So the PCAP is wrapping up at the end of this month. It's not actually due till March 1st, but you know, the application for implementation grants is pretty lengthy and would require a lot of data. So we're encouraging you know, jurisdictions to start thinking about what, you know, what's on their list of projects that, you know, would fall under these GHG reduction measures, and then finding lead applicants for coalitions in the region and just working together on that. Moses?
Yes, thank you. My question is, well, first, if you can distribute the slide presentation, that would be great. I'm kind of torn between the transportation and the building energy, because sometimes the energy kind of overlaps into transportation as well. So, you know, there might be an opportunity for a coalition. I represent the rural communities, but we've done some grid analysis out there. We've done some other things. We're currently doing a microgrid resiliency hub study in the rural areas, and they overlap with energy and transportation. So we might want to consider a hybrid of these as well. But again, I don't know the details of that building energy one versus the transportation and how they would overlap or anything like that. So I may have to check back with you to get a little more information. And that's something that folks may want to consider, kind of a hybrid of things, because there may be an overlap there. I know there are different categories, but you know, what's the true definition and what are the analysis going to be based on the benefits and the greenhouse gas reduction analysis and so forth. So there may be some more questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Moses. Are there any other questions? I know we did have a question in the chat regarding combining implementation grants with federal funding opportunities. So that's an idea for any lead applicant when exploring which sector they want to, you know, apply under. But we've been really focusing on existing programs and how we can supplement existing programs with funding. That way it could be justified to be implementation ready. So we have another hand up, Steve. I think you're
so thank you, Suram. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So just a point of introduction. So I'm Steve Hayes, Executive Director for Tranquility Resource Conservation District on the west side of Fresno County. And we really see this as a great opportunity. We step forward to kind of lead the effort as related to waste and wastewater. Additionally, being a local state agency dealing with natural resources and conservation, regardless of you're talking about forest lands or working landscapes or ag lands specifically, which would be the west side, which is the core economy for us. my feeling is that I would like to also work with San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. I've done work with them in the past as well. Really happy to have the opportunity not only to offer our services, and we already have a list of 9 potential implementation projects that do cover everything outside of, let's say, energy in urban areas. We're looking at very robust, very large scale. I think it was one of the individuals talked about, quote, microgrids. We're looking at whole orchard recycling, with 2024 being the last year you could do open air burning. We have research institutions that are starting to take a look at what's called the carbon cycle and working with the local community colleges. And in other words, we're trying to build an agricultural economy of the future and make it as resilient and not just sustainable, but on a regional basis where it's self-sufficient. So you have a lot of challenges that are going on. We're right in the middle of it, but most importantly is the west side. That's so critical, of an area, the San Joaquins, the Biolas, I think Biola was mentioned, Raisin City, and other communities and some of the socioeconomic and environmental challenges we've been facing. And most recently, just the Governor's Strategic Growth Council awarded us a transformative climate community planning grant, only one of 3 in the state of California. And we really like to work as closely as possible with COG, who I've worked with over many years. But this is the first opportunity post-COVID-19 and with IRA. And it was mentioned, it's going to come and go. And so I like to see us get $500 million minus 1 penny in that respect. So I think we're just saying we're good to go. We've got a pool of talent that we can reach out to. You got a great team there at COG, and I know that within everybody, within the membership of COG, you've got a lot of talent as well. So we've done this before, not 500 million, but getting up there, and Strategic Growth Council is looking at 200 million under IRA as well. So we've got that going. That's getting up there in the big numbers, almost a B, per billion. Happy to talk to anybody offline separately as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know Steve's been very vocal about taking the lead on one of these sectors, and I think wastewater and sustainable materials is also a logical choice for the Tranquility Resource Control District, or Conservation District. Does anybody have any projects that they have in mind that would potentially fall under one of these GHG reduction measures that they maybe want to discuss? Or any specific questions to today's presentation? Again, I can go back to any of the slides that we shared here today. There's a specific conversation to be had. Yes, Sophia.
I just was looking at the immediate next steps. It looks like February 1st is when an intent to file an application is due. What's involved in that?
It's pretty informal. It's just an email, and it's not a requirement. It's just kind of like a courtesy. But it's a pretty informal, just email to EPA stating that you're intending to apply, and they aren't asking for much else. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah. It's not
Do you-
like a form on grants.gov or anything. It's
Yeah,
just an
I mean,
email.
do you think we have to have our coalitions formed by then and sort of be able to say, I'm applying under this category with these partners, or no?
I think lead applicants should fill out the notice of intent. I think members on the coalition shouldn't feel inclined to send a notice of intent to apply. It should really just be the lead applicants, and the lead applicants can say there will be a coalition or not, and they don't. At that time, I wouldn't see a requirement to have who's in that coalition, because at that time you also won't have MOUs in place. So it's, yeah, again, it's really informal for the notice of intent. So I think what we really need to focus on is thinking of projects that fall under the priority measures, and the slide deck will be shared, so you'll be able to see what the committee approved today, and we can go from there in hearing from the member agencies what projects they have in mind, and organizing coalitions. But if any agency, eligible applicant here would like to take the lead, I think in the next couple of weeks, it's time to step up and follow through with that. So we wouldn't really, I think the recommendation isn't to have individual jurisdictions apply for their own projects, because at that point we're putting, cities against one another. And there can be multiple projects under one application. Jalasia?
Yeah, so could we talk a little bit more about what the structure might look like? So if for the city of Parlier, for example, if we wanted to take the lead on any of the categories, what kind of structure would we form for administering the grant reporting, the invoicing, distributing, or allocating how much funds are going to be dedicated to each jurisdiction?
That would really be dependent on the city of Parlier, if they're the lead, and if you're putting MOUs in place, there would be, lawyers involved in setting up how funding would be distributed. And we could talk offline if there's like a particular, or you could mention which sector Parlier would be most interested in applying for as lead, but
I don't have one right off
okay.
the I was just kind of curious.
I can give an example for President Cog's perspective. So we want to take the lead on transportation. However, since typically our transportation dollars are from FHWA and not EPA, we don't have that layer of oversight from Caltrans. So navigating how we can take these EPA dollars and then distribute them to our member agencies has created a, bit of a delay in us being able to affirmatively say we will apply as a lead applicant for transportation. We're having to kind of go back and forth with Caltrans and other state agencies like ARB and EPA themselves to figure out how do we provide oversight for EPA dollars for transportation implementation without Caltrans. So that's our dilemma. So, and since we don't have the expertise in the other three sectors, we wouldn't, be the best candidate to apply as a lead, but we want to encourage our cities to think about it and also identify who would be providing oversight over those dollars. So that was a really good question, Jalasia, and it's something that we've been thinking about, and I don't know if EPA's thought as much about as we do at the staff level. Are there any questions from the public? So anyone on the, Brenda, do you see anything that I might have missed? Okay. Well, if there aren't any additional questions or conversation, we can end today's meeting. And I hope we've given you all enough to think about. And we'll be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck with you all. And we look forward to hearing from some lead applicants. So, thank you.
Thank you. Very good
Appreciate
job
your
by the team.
engagement. Thank
Good
you.
effort. Thank you.